Have you ever looked in the mirror and thought, am I really living the life I was meant to? Welcome to Female Fluence, where we stop waiting for permission and start remembering our power. I am Pearl Mashour, a mom, educator, and a women's empowerment coach. And this is a space for honest conversations about growth, purpose, and becoming who you truly are. Here, we wake up to ourselves. We release the guilt, reclaim our confidence, and rise with grace, truth, and a little bit of fire. If something in you is whispering, there's more, take the self-reflection quiz at femalefluence.com and see where you are in your journey. Because you're not here to play small, you're here to rise fully. Today's episode is all about the mirror. Not the one hanging on your wall, but the one you carry inside of you. Because before you ever walk into a meeting, a relationship, a boardroom, or a new chapter in your life, the first thing that determines your power is how you see yourself. Your reflection sets the tone. It shapes your confidence. It decides whether you shrink or you rise. And once you claim that inner mirror, once you choose to see your own worth with clarity, the next step is just as important. Look around and notice who stands with you. The rooms you enter matter. The people who reflect your strength matter. And every woman deserves a community that lifts her, sharpens her, and reminds her who she is when she forgets. That's why today's conversation with Sheila Gujrathi is so meaningful. We're exploring how identity, confidence, and community come together to shape the woman you become, and how owning your presence starts long before you open the door. Sheila Gujrathi is a physician-turned-biotech leader who has spent more than 25 years navigating and transforming the male-dominated spaces, boardrooms, biotech startups, and executive leadership. As a woman of color, often walking into rooms where she saw no one who looked like her, she learned to build her own sense of belonging from within before she ever saw it reflected at her. She founded the Biotech CEO Sisterhood to bring together diverse women leaders and create a network of reflection, visibility, and shared strength. Her work, especially her book, The Mirror Effect, and her TEDx talk, Shattering the Glass Ceiling by Finding the Right Mirrors, all center around one message. Who we become is shaped by the mirrors we have, but also by the mirrors we learn to build for ourselves. Sheila, welcome to Female Fluence. I'm really excited about this conversation and to have you on my show today.
Well, thank you so much, Pearl. That was so beautiful. What a beautiful introduction. So I am already so excited to be here.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So let's dive in. Before you ever stepped into a biotech or boardrooms, growing up as an immigrant, and I can relate because I'm Persian myself, so I get there, I've been there. Were there times that you felt invisible? What part of you quietly held for the longing to be seen and valued?
Yes, actually, that was really a lot of my experience growing up in this country. I love being an American. I was born and raised in this country, and it's a core part of my identity. Having said that, it was also very challenging. I grew up in a small farm town in southern New Jersey, and we were the only Indian family from the Indian subcontinent to live in that town. And so really I had no other families, no other kind of supportive community there for me or my family, my parents. And they didn't exactly know what to do with us. We very much looked really different than all the other families that lived there. And we moved there because my mother is a physician. Both my parents are doctors. And my mom basically joined a private practice and was in this small town. And that's why we moved to this community. But it was hard. It felt, we experienced a lot of racism and, just people didn't exactly know what to do with us. So it was kind of a paradox because we look so different. And there was definitely remarks about how different we were. And,
Right.
people wrote Indians go home on our sidewalk and like there's just non-acceptance. But I also experienced that being invisible, like almost dismissed, or I just didn't even count or matter. And I remember kind of there would be beauty pageants or different kind of, you know, clubs or organizations or communities where there was like a selection process, and I just wasn't even part of those communities and those clubs. So I did grow up with this, feeling of being invisible while still being very visible in a way that I wasn't comfortable with because I just looked so different and I was like the other, the only brown kid or those types of, descriptions that
Right.
I would face. So I think so in terms of like then moving forward into the world, I think it's a great question about like what part of us feels invisible moving forward. And what I would say is I'm sure this is different for different individuals. I think for me it's that inner child. I feel like that inner child still that even as adults carries that with her or with him. And I think a lot of that gets then transmuted into
Yep.
different feelings. And I call it the FIDs, the fear, insecurity, doubt, and a big word, shame, that I think we carry around with us, even when we find ourselves in bigger communities and more diverse environments where we're still kind of trying to fit in and trying to belong.
That's very valid. And I mean, I just, it's so true because I feel like here you are, you're like very successful, you're very intelligent, you enter this boardroom, as this empowered woman, but inside it's like that inner child is like, oh, I'm the immigrant, I'm the little Indian girl. They're not going to accept me. They're not going to listen to anything I have to say today. And that, yeah, it does actually, we do carry those things from our childhood. It's unfortunate, but once we recognize it, then maybe we can work on releasing it, right? As
That's
I think,
exactly that's exactly right. I think the whole point from my and this is why I really want to write about it. I really wanted real talk about it because no one was talking about these things. And I think for many of us especially being, a trailblazer or being like the first person to, you know, have a senior role. For example, at one of the pharma companies I was working in, I was the only woman and the only person of color on the entire executive leadership team. So, there's a lot that we're kind of dealing with internally and externally.
hmm,
And so I just wanted to start writing about it, but I totally agree with you. The first step is just raising awareness of like what's going on inside of us that we're not even aware of at the time. And what are we facing externally? And not to normalize these behaviors, but at least to talk about that so we don't feel like we're the only one dealing with these things. And then understand how to be smart about it and how to, kind of deal with our inner feelings and then how to navigate the external environments we find ourselves in.
yeah, very true. I know you wrote that like your confidence felt strong as you walked in, like we were talking about, you enter this room, but inside you carry that fear that, I don't actually belong here. How did you figure out how to dismantle that inner voice that kept telling you, like, Sheila, you just don't belong in here. Like, just leave the room. You don't belong. How did you work on that?
I think part of it, it's definitely a journey and something that, I continue to work on. I think it's like part of our growth cycle, if you will, as even humans. And I'm sure men in all different demographics and everyone has
Yeah.
this to some extent. Like I've spoken to many of my male friends and allies and peers who also feel like an imposter and have
Imposter
imposter
syndrome. Yeah.
syndrome.
Yeah.
We so
Imposter
we
syndrome is common for both male and female. It's not talked about a lot, but it's definitely there.
It really is. So while the book is definitely geared towards women and people from underrepresented backgrounds, it's very true, I think, for men as well. And so it's almost like best practices in leadership, along our journeys, if you will. But for me personally, I think I did derive a lot of confidence from my achievements. So I was able to kind of come forward and, really excel and, what I was doing. And at first, of course, it started out technically. I'm a clinician, so I'm a physician. So, really understanding, the clinical aspects of drug development and then being a really good drug developer, knowing my subject matter very well, I think that was a real source of confidence for me in my early parts of my career, just being technically, clinically excellent and just, again, really being an expert in certain areas. And that felt like I felt really comfortable, like, no, I know my stuff.
Hmm.
I think that kind of contributes into like that whole model minority or the whole feeling for a woman, like you have to be, twice as good to get half the credit, but like really, like feeling like, I over prepared for meetings. Like I was really, very much kind of engaged in that kind of effort to where I derive my confidence from. But I think what's interesting and what I observed is as I was successful in my career going into higher echelons of leadership, kind of climbing up that corporate ladder, just naturally you are not relying as much on your technical expertise because you're dealing with more strategic matters. You have to, there's a lot of influencing, negotiating, leading and having really inspiring, right? So like you're doing different types of things as you get into these higher levels of leadership. So definitely my background and my experience was very strong because I've gotten multiple drugs approved and I've run successful companies. So that is still continues to be the case. But I also felt like I had to do more. And I actually started facing more FIDs and different, imposter syndromes as you go into these higher levels
Yeah.
because there it's like, well, what are the qualifications to be in this room, and to stay in this room? I think many of us can get into that room, but I argue that a lot of things that served us to get into that room or get a seat at the table aren't necessarily what's going to serve us best to stay at that table and to really influence and be powerful at that table. And that's, I think, again, a huge set of lessons learned, some epiphanies, insights that I kind of gleaned from all my experiences that I write about then in the book. And so now, if you ask me now, where do I get my confidence from? My confidence is from myself, knowing that I belong at that table, really intrinsically, thoroughly knowing how much I've done based on those experiences, but also just who I am. My integrity, my values, and how I want to show up for the people around me. And then my ability to really develop relationships, trust, confidence, and really do all of that with other people. And I think, having done that several times, I'm not going to say it's always going to be successful when I walk into a room, but I know I belong there. I know, I absolutely belong there as much as any other person at that table.
I love that. And I can just see like you just explained your visible growth. Like you just went from feeling very insecure, feeling very scared, having your inner child with you at all times, and finally going through that growth of no, I actually do belong here and I'm good just the way I am. And I am so knowledgeable. It's very impressive. You've achieved so much. So actually recognizing that that's part of your growth. And that's something that we all need to do on a regular basis to realize a lot of the things like, one of the things that I work with my clients is make a list of all your achievements. A lot of times we don't. We just sit there like, well, I didn't get this done. I failed at this. I never achieved this. My business is not doing. But it's like once you make that list and you realize actually you've achieved a lot. And of course, there's always room for more, but be content with who you are in the present moment. So, how would you say? I mean, I know corporate can be difficult. How has climbing the corporate ladder shaped you into who you are? I mean, you touched on it a little bit. Do you think it's kind of helped you? Like, are you at a point where you're content? Or is it, how we always like, well, there's more. Now I'm up here. I want to go one more step higher, right? And never being kind of satisfied and wanting to keep moving up.
Well, I felt fortunate at this point in my career. I have played a lot of different roles, which is, just has been wonderful. And I think to your point, that was always like my goal. Like, oh, well, I want to do this, and I haven't done this yet, and let me take this role on, and let me try my hand here. And of course, I could keep doing those things, and we are always learning and growing in all the different situations we find ourselves in. But I do feel like I checked a lot of those boxes. So for me, it's kind of coming back to what do I want to be spending my time on? And what do I, and where do I derive the most joy, satisfaction? How do I want to contribute in the world? And just what am I excited and passionate about? And I think that's what I spend time, thinking about. And it evolves, it changes, year to year. I've kind of given up on the whole 5-year plan. I have a general idea of like where I'm heading, but it's been such a dynamic environment. And I think, for me, like going up through the corporate ladder in terms of how it's influenced me, I really view, like I have a kind of a spiritual view of life, and I feel like everything we do in life contributes to our growth, whether that's
Definitely.
at work or at home.
Yeah.
It's like we're just one person and showing up in all these different environments, playing these different roles. Sometimes we're a parent or a sibling or a child, or, a daughter, a son, or a friend. And then in the workplace, we're playing whatever role we're playing at the time. And then that varies depending on the different situations we're in. But all of this is like, means for growth. We call it sadhana in Sanskrit. So take what we can, and again, even if where there are challenges, well, how do I grow from this experience? And actually the challenges are there to show you, hey, here's an area for growth. Hello, deal with me. And it'll keep coming up over and over again until you really deal with it. I find
Hmm.
that's also true. Like the universe keeps giving us the same type of challenges until we kind of realize, wow, okay, there's something here that I need to address maybe internally.
Yes,
Um,
definitely.
so I feel like, as I was saying, in the early parts of my career, I was facing a lot of that. And I think at some point in my career journey, I started to really understand what my authentic leadership style was. I really connected back into my values, my vision, my mission, and then my leadership style. And then that's from where I was operating. So it allowed me to kind of hone in what those things were to me and what gave me the most meaning and what my active choices are every day, and then operate from that place and show up into the world. So I feel so grateful that I've had such a robust professional life and journey that's helped inform, who I am personally, again, and how I show up in all these environments. So I think that's really been my kind of career path. And now
Hmm.
I have clarity on, again, what those values are. What am I here to do? Who do I want to work with? Who do I want to work for? And in terms of my shareholders, and kind of continue to show up in the world, and in my best, most authentic, powerful, thriving self.
I think that's something that everyone needs to do, whether they're in a leadership position. Like you need to just go back and like check in, reflect, and see, are you working through authenticity? Because that's what you're doing. And once, because some of us during the journey, we lose that, right? We get so focused on, oh, I need to get a better role. I need to get a better position. I need more income, more money, more things. And throughout that journey, we kind of lose the process. I like to send these quotes to my kids every morning before school starts and just to set their day. I'm a big quote person, as you can see. I have, all the linking my signs and stuff. But I read it, it was saying like, for people, they get excited about like, oh, I can't wait for like tomorrow. I'm for the future. Like, I want this and this and this. And then the moment we get to that point, instead of enjoying it, we're still thinking about, well, I want to now do this and this. So instead of being in the present and saying, you know what, I've achieved this, I'm here. Let me check in and make sure I'm aligned. I'm working with my values because that's key. Once we lose that, then your leadership will change, your goals will change, and then you're gonna feel burnt out and you're going to think like, why am I here doing this in the first place? Like you forget your entire focus. So I think that's great how you go back and you check in with yourself. Now tell me about Biotech CEO Sisterhood. I think that is really great that you created this community, and just tell us how that helped you. Why did you build it and what it actually is?
Yes, so it really goes hand in hand with the writing of the book as well. So coming out of the COVID pandemic, I was in a CEO role, and for the few years preceding that, and in that crazy VUCA pandemic, which was a lot of uncertainty.
Yeah.
And I found that, again, when you're in these roles, like it can be even more lonely. Everyone says that CEO role is a lonely role because you don't have any peers. You have your board, you have your executive team, and but you don't have anyone like that's just like a peer for you.
Yeah.
And so I was really trying to build a network, and there were some other women that were women CEOs at the time. There was a few of us, and we kind of see each other across the hall at investor conferences and banking conferences, but we didn't have a lot of time to spend with one another. But a few of us did start reaching out to each other, and it was definitely kind of a different type of interaction. Like we could be more ourselves. We could ask what we thought were the stupid questions.
Right.
We could use each other as sounding boards, and And again, while I had mentors and peers that I would go to, I definitely felt like there was a different kind of trusting environment within that small group that we were developing. And we said, so myself and two other women, we said, well, let's get a group of women CEOs together, like outside of the normal kind of conferences that we go to. Like, let's do something special and go away for a weekend and support each other more proactively. Like, let's build an active community where we can really be there for one another, kind of like the guys do,
Yeah.
like they do that. Like, they go on trips and they spend time together and they
Yeah.
get to know one another and they're there for one another and we can be
Right.
lifelines for each other. And so we basically did that. So this was in 2021. We thought of every woman CEO we could think of and put them on a list. We sent out emails and we organized a weekend retreat or summit. And 25 women came, and the Biotech CEO Sisterhood was born. And it was this amazing group of brilliant women, but who all showed up for each other. Like, we just showed up as our authentic selves. And, it was truly transformative for me personally, for the first time in my life, to walk into a room like that, where I felt so comfortable. I totally felt like I belonged. I wasn't wearing a mask. I didn't feel like I had to prove myself. And I just absolutely felt like I fit in, and more than fit in, I just felt happy and thriving to be in that environment. And I thought, oh my God, this is what other people must feel like all the time. I have never even felt this once. Like, this has been crazy that I've lived my life to this point thinking that, I really knew what this felt like, because I think I was so comfortable being uncomfortable. And now what I thought, if this is what normal feels like, this is going to be my new normal for sure. So now we're up to 400, over 450 women CEOs,
Wow.
public and private, running, the sisterhood. And we've expanded to C-level executives who are also developing sisterhoods, whether that's a chief financial officer, chief medical officer, chief scientific officer, chief human resource officer, all these different groups. So we're really broadening, and we're trying to be a beacon of role model and leadership in our industry. So we have like these Wear Pink days at one of our biggest investor conference at JP Morgan every January, where men and women come together in solidarity, wearing pink, celebrating, each other, and the diversity in our leadership and how important that is for biotech and pharma, and beyond. And so it's just become this an amazing experience, and it's affected me very deeply. It's again been a transformative experience, and at the same time, I started the sisterhood, and co-founded that. I started writing this book, and I started writing it for my younger self to say, well, again, there was no playbook, manual, journal when I was doing this, but let me pull together all my learnings. And I came up with this framework of knowing myself and holding up our own mirror, reflecting on our surroundings and understanding our environment, and make a life worth mirroring and
Is
setting
that what
ourselves
is
up
that
for
what the mirror
success.
effect means?
Yeah, it's basically like all of these aspects of, again, holding up our own mirror, surrounding ourselves with mirrors and knowing our environment well, and then being a mirror for others and make a life worth mirroring. So the things in my TEDx talk kind of came into my book, and that's really what the mirror effect is, like this process of, being able to use the mirror analogy in different ways, but all of it being transformative. So we can show up as our best selves, so we can be the most powerful, authentic leaders that we can be and empower ourselves. Again, like, it's not about shattering the glass ceiling with this inside of you or outside of you. It's like, how do we enable ourselves to be really successful? And how do we amplify our success together? So that's what this journey's been about. I started writing it for my younger self, but now it's really for all of us and the next generation of leaders as well.
I think that the mirror effect is so powerful. And if we all learn the concept of it, it can just have a ripple effect because like you're saying, you need to know how you are within yourself. You need to be able to see yourself. And then if you're a mirror for other people, you're a role model and people are learning from you. And then it's so much more, the impact is so powerful. So now you often say that mirrors aren't just role models. There are people who truly see us and reflect our brilliance, like we're talking about, like the role modeling, right? What are unexpected ways you've seen that happen in real life beyond mentorship and networking, like in your life or people around you?
Yes, I do really love this concept of mirrors and the breadth it has too. So, Sally Ride was the first American woman to go into space as a NASA astronaut. And she was a wonderful role model for so many women in STEM and girls and women in STEM. And she said, you can't be what you can't see. And she was that. She was a role model. And she was like, well, if Sally Ride can do it and be an astronaut, all of us can do things too. And so she really talked about that actively, and again went on to be a role model for so many women in STEM. So that was also kind of where the concept of a mirror came from to that extent, and really having mirrors so that we can say, well, if she can do it, if Sheila can do it, I can do it. If someone can do it, I see myself in them. I can do this, so that's great. But even blowing that out more, mirrors are people who, again, like you said, see you, really understand you, you know, celebrate you, have your back. They're there to lift you up when you fall down and celebrate you when you're at your peak. They're role models and mentors and sponsors, friends, family, people who celebrate you, who support you. So when I started realizing this concept of mirrors, like people, really unexpected people, I realized are mirrors for me. My children,
Mhm.
my daughter is a huge mirror for me. She often educates me about things that I don't see. She'll say, Mom, that was a microaggression. Why are you putting up with that? And I'm like, what are you talking about?
Wow.
She's educated me in my life about these concepts that are things I've been experiencing for decades, but I didn't have any language to put around that, so, and also just being a mirror for me in the sense that when I, was a mother to my daughter, I was realizing, wow, I parent so differently. And I would never speak to my daughter the way I speak to myself, or to my son to the way I speak to myself. And I started understanding, why is that okay? That insight of why is that okay for me to speak to myself that way? So they became a role model for myself in terms of how to parent myself and how to speak to myself and how to have more compassion for myself, because I have so much abundant compassion for both of them.
Yes.
So I think that, so all these different ways that we can use mirrors, as analogies, but recognizing who are the mirrors in our lives, our friends, our family, our loved ones, even some of our competitors, what do they bring out in us? And like, what do we really, what are we jealous about for that in them? And like, how do we apply that more to ourselves? So just all of these aspects of seeing mirrors in your life in all different facets, I think is really fascinating. And it's really been true for me.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. Now, on the other hand, you talk in your book, The Mirror Effect, about recognizing, you have like the supportive people, the people who are there for you, but then recognizing the toxic or limiting environments, because those can definitely shrink you, right? Can you share a moment when you realized that the glass ceiling wasn't just the external world, but the internal one you'd had actually accepted or created for yourself?
I think that there's a really important interplay between our inner world and our outer world. And I also wanted to speak about that in a more transparent way, in a way that maybe hasn't been covered, I think, in other leadership books, at least the ones I've been reading. So we're not just born with the FIDs, the fear, insecurity, doubt, and shame when we're young children. Like we experience different situations and conditioning and sometimes some trauma, and that informs our internal narrative, and the parenting that we have are familial, societal, and again, intergenerational, the things that are passed down to us, cultural. So there's all this complexity of what we experience that we internalize that becomes part of our inner narrative. And that also becomes sometimes part of our potential limiting thought patterns and beliefs, and negative talk track. I talk about the inner critic. We all have this inner critic in our heads, right? These things I kind of summarize that these are that sometimes forms this inner glass ceiling for us, that we're like, well, we'll go up so high, and then we're like, oh, but then we hit something. We hit that ceiling for ourselves, and we're holding ourselves back for whatever reasons we have. And so we experience this inner and outer environment. And I really wanted to talk about both in the book, because I say it first starts with ourselves, like it starts and ends with ourselves. That's why holding up our own mirror is so important. So the first section is about that. But I did want to talk about our external environments we find ourselves in, especially some of the negative environments, because that is the reality. And I
Mm-hmm.
want to speak openly about it, because sometimes we for those of us who've experienced that, we often think it's us, it's me. There's something wrong with me. Everyone else is thriving in this environment, but there's something wrong with me, and that's just not the case. And what I really wanted people to know, that we're going to experience difficult work environments. That's just reality. But how to operate in them, how to understand them, assess them, operate them, navigate them without it affecting our sense of self. Like that is something that I really wanted to focus in on so that we don't make our shame worse, frankly. Because, I call it the double whammy effect. We experience these things in our life and the insult enough is terrible the first time around. But then we internalize it and then we carry it
Hmm.
around with us for the rest of our lives. So it's like, we continue it. So for me, I think that again, that interplay between the inner and the outer, I think is something that I really want to talk about in the book. And so that's what I did. And for me personally, I think to your question, it's really when I started, really experiencing some of those toxic work environments, those negative work environments. My first reaction wasn't like, wow, this is totally inappropriate behavior. My first reaction would often be like, what have I done wrong?
Right, right, exactly. You
You
take
know,
it inside. It's my fault. I must have said something to trigger them or
And so you personalize it and you
hmm
say, oh, and then sometimes like I would call it being triggered. Someone would say something to you like, well, like, yeah, I don't think you really belong in this role, or you'll never get this role. Or if people will say, if I knew X, Y, and Z, I would never have signed up to work with you. And it's like, it's like completely inappropriate things people say to you. And, at the time now looking back, I know what I wish I would have said and felt at the time. But at the time, I was like, oh, there's something wrong with me. And it was devastating. And, again, and it's just like, so that is when you really hit that glass ceiling. That's when you hit the inner limiting thought patterns and beliefs when you have that type of reaction. And then when you break free of that, when you start to do the work, and I really advocate for doing the work proactively, because then when you find yourself in those situations, because we will, it's just a matter of
it's
time.
yeah, exactly.
But then you're really well equipped to deal with it because you know there's nothing wrong with you. So you're like, oh my God, it's really inappropriate that someone would say that to me. It was very easy for me to say if someone was saying that to my team or an employee of mine. It was very easy for me to say, no, no,
Yes,
no,
that's how
that's
it
just not
always
appropriate.
is.
Yeah. But when it comes directly at you, we need to be really well prepared and equipped to deal with those situations and say, you know what, that's really not appropriate, but I'm happy to talk to you about what you're concerned about. Let's break it down. Let's sit down. Let's find a time to talk about it. And when you come off so centered, calm, and grounded, you can really deal with situations in such a professional and centered manner. And I think,
Very true.
and the more we exercise these muscles, the more that continues to strengthen our resolve, our confidence, our composure. And just know that, again, we can operate from our sense of values and we can be incredibly successful, but we don't have to internalize the bullshit, if you will. So I think that's really like what I really want us all to break free of in a very aware and proactive manner.
I think that's really important to bring awareness to that because when we internalize, that's where brings so much pain and it affects our work, it affects our leadership. And it's interesting how you said it. Like a lot of times, yes, like you were saying earlier, we talk so nicely in a different way with our kids. Or if someone comes and tells us this is a problem, someone was talking to me like that, we can figure it out. But when it comes to ourselves, it's really hard. It is a muscle. We have to work on it and we have to learn to become more resilient and then have that emotional intelligence to deal with situations in a calm manner and be aware that this is not about me. I didn't do anything wrong. I'm not going to internalize this. I'm going to talk about this situation and calm the situation instead of being reactive and creating more issues. And then all of a sudden it's like a very toxic environment for everyone around you. So I love that. I think that's really, really important, especially in the corporate world. Now, with over 25 years from medicine to biotech leadership, what has surprised you the most about yourself? And what parts of your younger self do you honor more, especially that inner child that we talked about earlier in the interview?
I am really amazed at how brave I've been. I'm so proud of my younger self. I've often taken the road less traveled. I left medicine after doing all of my clinical training. And also, after a lot of familial pressure, I was told at a very young age that I was going to be a physician. And I went to a medical program. And so, like, I just thought that was going to be my life. But then when I realized at some point that I wasn't deriving so much joy from the practice of medicine, to have the courage to actually leave the, clinical and academic medicine to pursue other career paths was terrifying. And looking back at that younger self saying, wow, you listened to your inner voice and you made such a bold move,
Yes.
not knowing whether you would be successful or not, and against your families and your attendings' wishes, and everyone around you saying, "What are you doing? What are you like? What? You just finished it. Like you just spent all sorts of effort. You finished all of your medical training, your residency, fellowship, and you're doing what?
Rigorous
Um,
training. I'm sure there's a lot
rigorous.
of judgment, right? And it's really scary. I mean, it takes a lot of courage to step up and say no. Like I'm not happy. I'm switching, right? I'm changing. I'm following a different route.
Yes, and I've done that now multiple times, where, then I went to an amazing consulting company called McKinsey, and then I left and I went into biotech, and then I started the commercial organization, but realized I really wanted to do drug development and research and development, and, as a McKinsey consultant and as a physician. And so then I moved into R&D. No McKinsey consultant did that. So I've just taken, followed my inner voice, and I have made decisions based on, what I thought was, going to be the best fit for me
Mhm.
personally. Sometimes I felt like I was going backward. But it all worked out, and I am just really, I think, surprised by the level of courage I've kind of demonstrated through these decisions I've made, through the actions I've taken, and then even starting the sisterhood and writing this book and on my advocacy journey. I'm really proud of the drugs I've gotten approved, my children, and my family, and now some of these advocacy efforts I've had. I call it the gift that keeps on giving back to me. But being kind of bold and courageous to talk about things that haven't been spoken about, and and just like put myself out there and be vulnerable. It surprises me. It surprises me. Like social media, I wasn't on social media at all. I had gotten off all of social media, but that's not how we can have impact. And we have
Yeah.
to be out there talking about these things. And when I talk about myself and things I've gone through, or people just write to me and say, "Thank you so much for sharing that. It's exactly what I need to hear at a particular moment." I'm sure you experience this too, Pearl. But I really appreciate you talking about this because I don't feel so alone. I feel so much better. And wow, like if I could help people like that in a broader scale, like how meaningful is that? So all of these things I think again have reinforced decisions
Mhm.
I've made, but it hasn't been easy, to kind of face your fears and still put yourself out there and still do those things and take those actions. So I really advocate for people to just do it. Just do it, follow your dreams, and listen to your inner voice. It's hard, but you're going to learn so much about yourself,
Of course.
and it's such a rewarding journey, and I'm really proud and amazed that I've had that courage and resilience through my career.
You definitely need to be proud. And I think, I mean, it is. And it's all about that growth, right? The more scary it is, the more you find the courage with each step, you just feel yourself growing. And that itself, and then just making a difference in other people is so rewarding. Now, if you could speak directly to a young woman of color entering a boardroom today with all that you know, right? This woman is alone, she's nervous, she's questioning which mirror she can hold up. What would you want her to know before she even steps into a room?
Well, mainly, you got this. You're going to be great, and you absolutely belong in that room. You have nothing to prove to anybody. That's the way I start the book. It's a Maya Angelou quote: "You alone are enough.
I love
You have
that quote.
nothing to prove to anyone." And it's so true. So I would definitely say that to someone. Now, will they internalize it and really feel it in their heart and their bones? I don't know. So then I would also say, I totally believe in you, believe in yourself, and you are not alone. We are here with you. You're not meant to do this alone. We have your back. So, we are also here. We have your back. Go in there and, do your best. And, if it goes well, great. And if it doesn't, we're here for you, and you'll figure it out. So it's the way I talk to my daughter. It's really true. And so people need to feel like they have their back. I thought I had to do everything by myself. Now I tell everyone you don't have to do it alone. Find your people. It's really important.
That's really important. And that's why I love that you started this biotech sisterhood because that's the number one problem. Like, we all feel like, oh, I'm experiencing this alone. And even if you find one person, two-person who those are your people and they get you. They understand what you're going to do. And it's not just about the corporate world, but anything that you're experiencing in life. It has such a powerful impact, that sense of sisterhood, that sense of community. And we can really like work together, rise together. You feel so much more stronger that you have people to turn to. And I'm sure back then when you were starting off, if you had, let's say that sisterhood had been already created, like your journey would have been so different for you to know that, okay, it's not just me. There's other women that feel exactly the same way. They're really feeling alone. They're scared. They feel like they don't belong. And that would have changed things for you. But I'm so glad that now you have created this and you're changing it for so many others. So that's so impactful. Now, if there is one shift, Sheila, that you hope every woman listening right now to your story, if they could just make a shift for themselves, whether it's their mindset or some embodied power, like what would it be? And not necessarily in the corporate world, but just anything. Like if they are in a bad marriage and they want to leave, or they want to go back to work, but they're so terrified because they haven't worked for 20 years and they don't even know what skills they have in this new world of AI and everything. So, I mean, what shift would you empower a woman to think and say, I am enough, and I'm good just the way I am. I can do anything.
It's that first section of the book, part one, hold up your own mirror and know thyself, to get to a really true embodiment of understanding that we are all powerful beyond measure and that we belong and that we alone are enough, that whole concept. And I would say, to be practical, one of the biggest things that have helped me along that journey is self-compassion. It's really being compassionate with ourselves in a very deep way and hopefully with that leading to acceptance, self-acceptance, and honoring ourselves and our dreams, and then going forth to make that happen. But I really want to emphasize that first, because when you're beating yourself up all the time and you have that, itty bitty shitty committee in your head and
Mhm.
all the should, woulds, and coulds, and you're shitting all over yourself, like it's very difficult to really be your best self and have courage and put yourself out there to follow those dreams. So, I have done a lot of this in my own life, just really having compassion for yourself, loving yourself, accepting yourself, you know, really starting there. And like, if you can develop that mindset where you're cherishing yourself, you're going to stand up for yourself. You're going to do the right things for yourself. So that's the mindset I do. I kind of start with. I start with it now for myself when I'm having a bad day, or I wake up in the middle of the night, kind of with an anxiety attack, or, all these things happen to me. I really go there now. And I have a set of exercises and practices and the muscles that I have built up over the years. And it's a real game changer. So that's really what I would recommend for people listening, and that's what I talk about now with my friends and my family, and because I think that's a great tool that can really, and something that can really set us free.
Yeah, it definitely would set you free. I mean, this is what I reiterate over and over in every episode: self-love, self-acceptance, self-compassion. And once you learn exactly having that tool, a set of tools that you can say, as we all do, we all have bad days, we all have rough days, it's like up and down, but being able to like access that toolbox and saying, okay, like I'm having a bad moment, like how do I kind of reset my thoughts, reset my feelings, and be be kind to myself, and start from there.
Yeah, I think I used to focus more on like the confidence, and I do still that, like, I'm amazing and I'm so, so capable and doing all of that too. Like all of that's really, really powerful. And I am powerful, like all these things. But I think giving yourself some grace
Hmm.
to acknowledge what you're feeling and why you're feeling it and how much you've done in the face of whatever you've experienced in your life and the situations we've been in. We've all, a lot of things have happened along our journey, and life continues to throw us curveballs. I lost my father at a very young age, and that was a huge curveball for me in my
Yeah.
life. And
Sorry.
having to deal with that serious, like that, unfathomable loss. It's such a young, precious time in my life. It's truly, it's like heartbreaking, but it's part of my reality. And how I've dealt with it, and and then how it shows up in different situations for me, like having a lot of compassion for that in myself. So all of us have our story. Let's have compassion for ourselves, and because that gives us so much strength. And I think just kind of continue to strive and fight and push and push our way through it. Yeah, that's good too, to some extent. But I have really come to realize that from that place of compassion and love and self-acceptance and understanding that we belong, and then pursuing our dreams with all our badassery is good. We can absolutely pursue our dreams, but in a way where we're just not beating ourselves up all the time.
Yeah. As a woman, we tend to do that, the beating ourselves up. It's like, I'm not a good mom. I didn't do this. That's something we need to stop doing. I have absolutely loved talking to you today. I just feel like it's just been, our conversation has really reminded us that leadership really starts with that mirror that we keep talking about, right? It begins with that honest self-awareness, understanding which environments actually shrink or expand us. That's really key for us to recognize those. And then intentionally building a life filled with people and structures that reflect our strength. Your story today, Sheila, has showed us the reality of being the only one in the room and the courage it takes to rewrite your own narrative. It also revealed the power of sisterhood representation and choosing a community that sees you clearly. So please, everyone, look at your own reflection with honesty. Pay attention to the spaces you're in and start creating the mirrors you never had. Because when women see themselves as they truly are, they rise. And as I always say and emphasize, when we rise together, we change everything. This is actually your reminder. You don't need permission to step into your voice, your power, or your next chapter. All you need is just the right mirrors and the courage to become the real you. Is there a final message or a piece of guidance that you want to leave my listeners with today as we end?
Just that you can start today. No need to delay. Just decide, have intentionality in terms of what you want to create in your own life or the areas that you want to make a difference in, and just start, and it's intentionality is very powerful.
So intention and start today, not tomorrow, but today. Thank you so much. All the links will be in my show notes so you can find more information about Sheila, find her book. And thank you so much for being on Female Fluence today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for spending this time with me here on Female Fluence, where we rise, reflect, and remember who we are. If something from today's episode spoke to you, share it with another woman who's ready to rise too. And before you go, download your free empowerment coaching guide at femalefluence.com. It's your next step toward living with more clarity and confidence. You can find me on Instagram and Facebook at @Mashour_femalefluence. And if you're ready for deeper support, sign up for a free discovery call. I would love to connect with you. Remember, my friends, don't just exist. Live your life fully, bravely, and in truth. I'm Mashour, and until next time, stay true, stay powerful, and stay you.